I'm 36, male, and until 2 months ago, I thought my life was at the very least stable. My wife, 34, and I have been married for 10 years. We own a modest home in a quiet suburban neighborhood. Nothing flashy, just comfortable. I work as a systems analyst for a mid-sized company, which means I'm often required to travel for client meetings. My wife, on the other hand, worked from home as a graphic designer. She always said she preferred the quiet life, and I believed her. At least I thought I did. 2 months ago, I was scheduled to be away for a week for work. It wasn't uncommon, and while I hated being away from home, I trusted my wife completely. Or at least I used to. The morning I left, she kissed me goodbye, told me she'd miss me, and asked me to text her when I landed. Standard stuff. Looking back, I realized now there were cracks I hadn't noticed, a certain coldness that had crept in over the past year. But at the time, I chalked it up to stress or the natural ebb and flow of a long-term relationship. I landed and sent her the usual "made it safe" text. Her reply was prompt but brief. No big deal. The rest of the week went as planned. We didn't talk much while I was away, which wasn't unusual. She said she was busy with a big project, and I was bogged down with meetings. But here's where things started to get weird. When I returned home earlier than expected, my trip was cut short due to a client cancellation. I opened the door to find the house eerily quiet. Normally, my wife would greet me, or I'd hear her in her office. This time, nothing. I dropped my bags and headed upstairs. Her office door was closed. Not unusual. I knocked. No answer. I pushed the door open and froze. The room was empty, emptier than it should have been. Her desk was cleared off, her usual clutter gone. My stomach tightened as I walked into our bedroom. That's when I heard it, a faint sound coming from the guest bedroom. I pushed the guest bedroom door open and nearly fell over. My wife was in bed with another man. It wasn't just the sight of them tangled together that hit me like a freight train. It was the audacity. In my house, in the middle of the day, while I was supposed to be out of town, I stood there for what felt like an eternity before either of them even noticed me. My wife scrambled to cover herself, her face pale. The man, taller than me, younger, looked at me with a mix of smugness and fear. "What the hell is this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "It's not what it looks like," my wife stammered, the classic cheater's line. I laughed bitterly. "Really? Because it looks like you're screwing someone in my house while I'm away." The man, who I'll call AP, a fair partner, had the audacity to smirk. "Maybe if you paid more attention to her, she wouldn't need me," he said. That was it. I snapped. I lunged at him, but he ducked out of bed and grabbed his clothes, retreating like a coward. "Get out," I said through gritted teeth. "Both of you." My wife started crying, saying we needed to talk, but I wasn't having it. I told her to pack her things and leave. She begged, saying it was a mistake, that she loved me, but I wasn't listening. I couldn't. Over the next few days, things escalated. My wife refused to leave, saying she had nowhere to go. She claimed I was overreacting, that it was a moment of weakness. Meanwhile, I was busy filing for divorce. I also consulted a lawyer about evicting her legally. Apparently, since her name was on the deed, I couldn't just throw her out. But that didn't mean I had to make it easy for her. I shut down her access to our joint accounts, canceled all shared credit cards, and cut off anything I was paying for. She screamed at me, calling me petty and vindictive, but I didn't care. Then the final straw. I came home one evening to find AP sitting in my living room. My wife looked at me defiantly and said, "He's staying here until we figure things out." I couldn't believe it. "You brought him back into my house? Are you insane?" "He's my support system," she said, as if that justified anything. I didn't say another word. I turned around, walked out, and called my lawyer. This is where the real revenge began. My lawyer advised me to document everything, and I mean everything. So I started keeping records of every interaction, every time AP was in the house, and every instance of my wife refusing to cooperate. I also installed security cameras in the common areas of the house. Legally, I couldn't record in private spaces, but the living room, kitchen, and hallways were fair game. A week later, I served my wife with divorce papers. She cried and said I was destroying her life. AP, ever the entitled jerk, told me I was being childish and needed to grow up. But I wasn't done. I had a surprise for them. One day, while my wife and AP were out, I changed the locks. Before anyone freaks out, I did this legally. My lawyer had advised me that as long as I provided her with a new key and access to her belongings, I was within my rights. When they returned and found themselves locked out, they lost it. My wife pounded on the door, screaming that I was a monster. AP threatened to call the police, which I encouraged. "Go ahead," I said through the door. "Let's see how that works out for you." When the police arrived, I calmly explained the situation, showing them the security footage of AP living in my house without my consent. The officers sided with me, telling my wife and AP to take it up with the courts. But the best part? My lawyer had already filed for an exclusive occupancy order, which, given the circumstances, the judge granted. My wife was ordered to vacate the house within 72 hours. The aftermath was messy but satisfying. My wife tried to play the victim, telling anyone who would listen that I was a heartless bastard who had ruined her life. AP disappeared shortly after, proving he was nothing more than a fling. The divorce was finalized a few months later, and I came out of it in a much better position than I expected. The judge was sympathetic to my situation and awarded me the house. My wife got some personal assets, but not much else. The eviction itself was a spectacle. My wife, let's call her ex-wife now, refused to go quietly. She screamed at the movers I hired to pack up her things, accusing me of being heartless and vindictive. AP was nowhere to be seen, which I figured was typical for someone as spineless as him. She tried every trick in the book to delay the process, even claiming she had nowhere to go. I wasn't buying it. She had friends, family, and, judging by the text messages I found on her old phone, that she forgot to clear a whole network of people who probably would have been thrilled to host her. But entitlement runs deep. She didn't want to leave the house because she believed she was owed something more, something I didn't agree with. When the movers finally finished, she stood in the doorway and said, "You're going to regret this. You'll end up alone, and no one will love you like I did." I didn't flinch. If this is what your love looks like, I'll take my chances. Of course, she didn't go down without a fight. A few weeks after she moved out, she filed a motion to contest the divorce settlement. She claimed that I had unfairly locked her out and that AP wasn't living there full-time, so it shouldn't have mattered. But thanks to the security footage and detailed records I kept, the judge wasn't buying her sob story. During one of the court hearings, she even tried to argue that AP had only been at the house because he was helping her with work. The judge's expression was priceless. He asked her why this supposed work colleague was walking around shirtless in my living room and sleeping in the guest room. She stammered through some incoherent excuse, and the judge quickly shut her down. "Your actions demonstrate a clear lack of respect for your husband and his property," he said. "The court sees no reason to adjust the settlement in your favor." That was the nail in the coffin. She left the courtroom fuming, but there was nothing she could do. But the real cherry on top came a few weeks later. I was cleaning out the guest room, something I'd been avoiding since the whole fiasco, when I found a small stash of papers AP had apparently left behind. They were financial documents, including a few overdue bills and collection notices. Curiosity got the better of me, and I did a little digging, all completely legal, mind you. Turns out, AP had been using my house as a hideout because he was in deep trouble with creditors. Armed with this new information, I made a few calls. It didn't take long for one of the collection agencies to confirm that AP had listed my address as his residence. This was a violation of the eviction order, as he had no legal claim to my property. I reported it to the court, and within a week, AP was slapped with fines for falsifying residency information. That should have been the end of it, but entitled people rarely learn their lessons. A few months later, AP showed up at my door unannounced. He had the audacity to demand I give him some items he accidentally left behind, including a gaming console and a watch. "Those things belong to me," he said, puffing out his chest like he thought intimidation would work. I didn't even let him finish. "Anything you left behind is either in the trash or donated," I said flatly. "You want something back? Take it up with the Goodwill down the street." He tried to argue, saying I had no right to throw his things away, but I shut him down. You had no right to be in my house in the first place. Consider this your final warning. If you step foot on my property again, I'll have you arrested for trespassing." He left, but not before muttering something about how this isn't over. I haven't seen or heard from him since. Life post-divorce has been surprisingly peaceful. It took me a while to adjust to living alone, but I've come to appreciate the quiet. The house feels like mine again, free of the toxic energy that once lingered in every corner. As for my ex-wife, I heard through mutual acquaintances that she's struggling. AP ghosted her not long after the eviction, and she's been couch surfing ever since. Part of me feels a twinge of pity, but then I remember the choices she made. She thought she could have her cake and eat it too, but life doesn't work that way. I've learned a lot through this ordeal, about people, about trust, and about myself. If there's one takeaway, it's this: never let anyone make you feel like you're disposable in your own life. And seriously, don't forget to subscribe. You never know when I'll have another story about entitled people getting exactly what they deserve. Trust me, it's worth it.